What if everything you thought you knew about the O.J. Simpson case was wrong? Was he really the killer, or was the trial just an elaborate show for the public? A case full of twists, evidence that didn't add up, and a verdict that shocked the world. But here's the real question. Was the truth about Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman's deaths ever really revealed? Keep watching as we dive into the most controversial murder trial in American history. In the summer of 1994, the brutal murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend, Ron Goldman, shook the nation. And at the heart of it all, former football hero turned Hollywood celebrity, O.J. Simpson. But the story didn't end there. The world watched as Simpson was charged with murder, then went on trial in what would become the most televised courtroom drama of the 20th century. But what really happened that night? Was O.J. Simpson guilty? And why has the case haunted the public? For decades, the investigation into the brutal murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman began in the early hours of June 13, 1994. Early that morning, a 911 call placed by a neighbor would set the stage for what would become one of the most heavily publicized investigations in history. The bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson, O.J. Simpson's ex-wife, and Ron Goldman, a 25-year-old restaurant waiter, were discovered outside Nicole's condominium in Brentwood, California. The scene was chilling. Both victims were brutally stabbed, their bodies found in a pool of blood, with Nicole's throat slashed and Ron Goldman suffering multiple stab wounds. The initial response by law enforcement painted a grim picture. Investigators arrived on the scene, immediately noting the severity of the injuries. The brutality of the crime left little doubt that this wasn't a simple robbery gone wrong. The nature of the attacks, particularly the precision and ferocity with which the victims were stabbed, suggested that whoever had committed this crime was likely someone close to the victims, someone who might have had a personal motive. One of the first pieces of evidence that linked the crime to O.J. Simpson was the bloody glove found at the scene. A dark leather glove was discovered near the bodies of Nicole and Ron, and investigators immediately saw a connection. The glove, which was soaked in blood, seemed to match another glove found at Simpson's home, creating a link between the crime and the famous football star. This discovery would later play a critical role in the prosecution's case, but it also sparked a series of questions about whether it could have been planted or mishandled during the investigation. As investigators sifted through the scene, they discovered more damning evidence. Blood stains at the crime scene, along with a trail of blood leading from the crime scene to Simpson's car, appeared to link the murders directly to him. The presence of Simpson's blood, alongside the victim's blood, left little room for doubt in the eyes of investigators. The blood samples, however, would later become a central point of controversy during the trial. The chain of custody of this evidence would come under intense scrutiny, leading many to question whether the blood samples had been tampered with or mishandled. Simpson's first response to the allegations was a denial of any involvement in the crime. He claimed to have been at his home in the hours leading up to the murders, offering an alibi that placed him at his estate with friends and family. Simpson further claimed that he had not been near the murder scene even as investigators were piecing together evidence that suggested otherwise. In the days following the murders, Simpson became the prime suspect. The police focused their attention on him, especially after learning about the history of domestic violence between Simpson and his ex-wife. Nicole had filed for divorce from Simpson years earlier, but their tumultuous relationship continued, with allegations of abuse emerging in the weeks and months prior to her death. The night of the murders, Nicole had reportedly attended a dinner with friends and family, and she had planned to meet Ron Goldman shortly before her death to pick up a pair of glasses she had left at his restaurant. The pair had no apparent romantic connection, but they were close friends. Simpson's strained relationship with Nicole had been well documented, with multiple police reports showing previous incidents of violence. Just 2 years before her murder, Nicole had called the police after a violent altercation with Simpson, claiming that he had threatened her life. In fact, Simpson had been arrested for spousal abuse on more than one occasion. These allegations painted a clear picture of a man with a violent history, and it was this history that made him the prime suspect in the murders of Nicole and Ron. One of the most infamous moments of the investigation came when the blood-stained glove was presented. During the trial, the glove, which had been found near the crime scene, was said to match a second glove found at Simpson's estate. Prosecutors argued that the gloves were part of the same pair worn by the killer, and they presented the evidence as critical. to linking Simpson to the crime, but the moment that would define the case occurred during the trial itself. Simpson, in front of the jury, was asked to try on the glove. When he attempted to put it on, it appeared to be too small. His defense attorney, Johnny Cochran, famously uttered the phrase, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." This moment would become one of the most iconic moments in criminal trial history. For many, the sight of Simpson struggling to fit the glove on his hand cast doubt on the prosecution's case. The glove, which seemed to fit perfectly when it was found at the scene, appeared not to fit Simpson during the trial. This raised doubts in the minds of the jury, and the prosecution was left grappling with the question of whether the glove had been properly handled or whether it had been tampered with. For investigators, the blood evidence was only part of the puzzle. They had yet to figure out how the perpetrator had gained access to the victim's home and how Simpson was connected to the crime beyond the blood. They turned to forensic experts to piece together the rest of the mystery. As the investigation unfolded, investigators began to piece together a chilling timeline of events. Simpson had been seen at a number of locations during the evening of June 12th, but his alibi quickly became inconsistent with the physical evidence of the crime scene. Simpson's neighbor, Cato Kalin, testified that Simpson had returned to his home late that evening, but investigators found no clear record of his movements during the critical hours between the time of the murders and his return home. Simpson's alibi was scrutinized heavily during the investigation. His account of his evening did not add up when compared with the evidence that had been collected. His movements, as outlined by phone records, were inconsistent with his claims. Moreover, Simpson had a history of violent behavior toward Nicole, further placing him in a precarious position. As the evidence mounted, it seemed as though Simpson had been lying about his whereabouts on the night of the murders. One of the most telling pieces of evidence came from the security footage at Simpson's estate. A close examination of the video footage revealed that Simpson's vehicle was parked in an unusual position at the time of the murders, leading investigators to believe that he had been present at the crime scene despite his denials. His failure to account for the movements of his car further undermined his alibi, making it clear that Simpson was at the center of the investigation. As the investigation continued, the role of the Los Angeles Police Department (LAPD) became increasingly contentious. The department, which had been embroiled in its own scandals and accusations of racism, came under fire during the trial. The LAPD had a history of mistreating people of color, and this fact played a significant role in Simpson's defense strategy. Simpson's defense team, led by Johnny Cochran, used the LAPD's reputation to their advantage. They argued that the department, particularly Detective Mark Fuhrman, had planted evidence to frame Simpson. The defense painted the police as a racially motivated force, looking to bring Simpson to trial because of his high-profile status and their animosity toward African American celebrities. The argument was effective, especially as Fuhrman's racist history was exposed during the trial, making it difficult for the prosecution to maintain credibility. The allegations of police corruption and racism created a significant shift in the public's perception of the case. As the trial dragged on, many began to question whether Simpson was truly guilty or whether he was the victim of a racially biased police force. The racial divide that had long existed in Los Angeles seemed to be at the heart of this case, and it became clear that the investigation would not be straightforward. In the end, the investigation revealed far more than just the identity of the killer. It uncovered a web of lies, police misconduct, and systemic issues that would define the case for years to come. But as the trial continued, the public's view of O.J. Simpson, Nicole Brown Simpson, and Ron Goldman's tragic deaths remained as murky as the evidence itself. The O.J. Simpson case remains one of the most controversial and talked about legal battles in American history. Despite a verdict that shocked the world and the countless hours of courtroom drama, many questions surrounding the case have never truly been answered. The trial, the investigation, and the aftermath left behind a trail of doubts, inconsistencies, and lingering mysteries that continue to fuel debate. These unanswered questions are central not only to understanding what happened on that fateful night in 1994, but also to grappling with the deeper implications of race, celebrity, and justice in America. The most obvious and fundamental question that remains unanswered in the O.J. Simpson case is, was O.J. Simpson truly the killer of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. While Simpson was acquitted in a criminal court, many still question whether justice was truly served. The prosecution presented a seemingly strong case, including the bloody glove found at the crime scene and Simpson's DNA on the scene. But the defense team, led by Johnny Cochran, sowed enough doubt in the jury's mind that they returned a verdict of not guilty. However, the question of Simpson's guilt doesn't just rest on the evidence or lack thereof, but also on the public perception of the trial. To this day, many believe Simpson was guilty, despite the acquittal. Simpson's behavior, including his history of violence toward his ex-wife Nicole and his inconsistent alibi on the night of the murders, seem to suggest that he was the one responsible for the killings. But could it have been someone else? Or was the prosecution's case flawed? Were there simply too many holes in the evidence? Simpson's infamous "if it doesn't fit, you must acquit" moment, during which he struggled to fit a glove onto his hand, was a pivotal point in the trial. The glove seemed too small for him, leading many to believe that it had been planted. Was the glove really too small? Or had Simpson simply tried to manipulate the moment to his advantage? This moment continues to haunt the case, leaving many wondering whether the evidence was mishandled or manipulated, or if Simpson was truly innocent. The tampering of evidence became a key issue during the O.J. Simpson trial, and to this day, it remains one of the most unresolved questions. The prosecution presented several pieces of evidence that linked Simpson to the crime, including blood samples, a bloody glove, and shoe prints. However, the defense argued that some of this evidence had been contaminated or planted by the LAPD in an attempt to frame Simpson. The most famous example of alleged evidence tampering occurred with the blood samples collected at the crime scene. When Simpson's blood was found at the scene, it seemed like a clear sign of his guilt. However, during the trial, it was revealed that the LAPD had mishandled the blood evidence, leading the defense to claim that the evidence had been tampered with or even planted. The issue is further complicated by the involvement of Detective Mark Furman, whose racist past was exposed during the trial. Furman's role in the investigation and his credibility were questioned, leading some to believe that the evidence had been planted or fabricated by the LAPD in an attempt to convict Simpson. Could the prosecution's case have been ruined by police misconduct, or was Simpson's defense team simply able to sow doubt effectively? This question has never been fully answered. The mishandling of evidence by the LAPD remains a stain on the case, and the possibility of evidence tampering continues to fuel conspiracy theories about the true identity of the killer. One of the most puzzling aspects of the case is the timeline surrounding the 911 call. On the night of the murders, Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were killed outside of Nicole's Brentwood condominium. Despite the brutal nature of the attack, no one called 911 until after the bodies had been discovered. Why didn't anyone make the call sooner? There were multiple witnesses at the scene who could have alerted the authorities, but for reasons that remain unclear, no one did. Some speculated that the neighbors were either unaware of the severity of the situation or unsure of what was happening. Others have suggested that Simpson might have had a hand in preventing the call, considering his history of controlling behavior. But why didn't someone make the call? Was there a deliberate attempt to cover up the crime? Or did the witnesses simply fail to recognize the severity of the situation? This remains one of the most haunting questions in the case. A quick 911 call could have changed the course of the investigation and perhaps led to a quicker arrest and conviction. The delay in contacting the authorities is one of the factors that has raised doubts about the true nature of the crime and the people involved. The LAPD's involvement in the O.J. Simpson case remains one of the most controversial aspects of the investigation. Throughout the trial, the defense team consistently pointed to the history of racial tension between the police and African American communities in Los Angeles, suggesting that the police were biased and that they had mishandled or planted evidence to frame Simpson. The LAPD's treatment of Simpson, particularly Detective Mark Furman, who was exposed for his racist remarks and history of misconduct, undermined the credibility of the investigation. Furman's role in the case became a central issue during the trial, and many questioned whether the police had acted out of racial animus. The defense team made the argument that Furman had planted evidence to ensure Simpson's conviction, which led to widespread doubts about the integrity of the investigation. But the question remains, was the LAPD truly corrupt, or was the defense simply able to exploit the department's history to create doubt? How much did the police's actions impact the case? Could a more impartial investigation have led to a different outcome? These questions have never been fully resolved, and they continue to plague the public's perception of the case. Perhaps the most frustrating and perplexing unanswered question is, why did the jury acquit O.J. Simpson? The trial was a media circus, with every moment broadcast live for the world to see. The prosecution presented what seemed like overwhelming evidence of Simpson's guilt, but the jury ultimately found him not guilty of murder. Some legal experts argue that the jury was swayed by the defense's argument that Simpson was the victim of a racially biased police force, and that the prosecution had failed to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Others believe that the jury was simply not convinced by the evidence, and that the defense team did a better job of casting doubt than the prosecution did of proving Simpson's guilt. The jury's decision continues to be a topic of heated debate. Was the decision based on the strength of the evidence, or was it influenced by the racial dynamics of the case? Did the media's portrayal of the trial impact the jury's verdict, or was it simply a matter of the prosecution failing to make its case in a way that was compelling enough to convince the jury? These are questions that have never been definitively answered. The final question that continues to linger in the wake of the O.J. Simpson trial is, was Simpson's acquittal a victory for justice, or did it represent a miscarriage of justice? The trial exposed deep flaws in the American legal system, including issues of race, celebrity, and police corruption. But did Simpson's acquittal ultimately represent a triumph of the rule of law, or did it simply reinforce the notion that the wealthy and famous can avoid accountability? For many, Simpson's acquittal became a symbol of the failure of the justice system. For others, it was a reminder that the legal system must operate on the principles of due process, even when the evidence seems overwhelming. The question of justice in the case remains unresolved, with some seeing it as a miscarriage of justice and others as a triumph of the legal system's commitment to fairness. These unanswered questions continue to haunt the O.J. Simpson case, keeping the mystery alive decades later. Was Simpson guilty? Could the evidence have been tampered with? Why was the 911 call never made sooner? The questions surrounding the case are as complex and elusive as the truth itself, leaving many to wonder whether we will ever fully understand. What happened that night in 1994? The O.J. Simpson case is more than just a legal drama or a celebrity scandal. It is a cultural touchstone that has captivated the public's imagination for decades. Even after over 25 years, the trial continues to spark debates, documentaries, and conversations. But what is it about this case that has made it such an enduring fascination? Why do millions of people still remember the details of the case, even as new scandals and stories have emerged? At the heart of the O.J. Simpson case lies an intersection of race and celebrity that made the trial not just a legal matter, but a social phenomenon. Simpson, a beloved sports icon and Hollywood celebrity, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight as a suspected murderer. For many, Simpson represented the American dream, an African-American man who had risen from humble beginnings to become a world-famous figure. But the murder charges shattered this image, forcing the public to confront the darker side of his fame. The racial dynamic added another layer of complexity to the case. Simpson's defense team, led by Johnny Cochran, famously used the argument that Simpson was the victim of a racist police force, particularly targeting Detective Mark Foreman, whose past racist remarks were exposed during the trial. The trial became a microcosm for the racial tension that had been simmering in Los Angeles for years, especially in the wake of the Rodney King beating and the 1992 LAA riots. For many, Simpson's acquittal felt like a win for African Americans, who saw in it a statement against systemic injustice. The combination of celebrity and race turned the trial into a spectacle with a polarized public. Some viewed Simpson as a victim of racial prejudice, while others saw him as a dangerous criminal. This division, along with the high-stakes nature of the trial, created an emotional engagement that many could not look away from. The trial of O.J. Simpson was one of the first major criminal trials to be broadcast live, bringing it directly into living rooms across the country. The media's role in the trial cannot be overstated. The constant news coverage and live broadcasts made it an event rather than just a legal proceeding. It wasn't just the facts of the case that people followed, it was the spectacle. The trial became a real-life soap opera, with twists, turns, and shocking moments that kept viewers on the edge of their seats. The drama inside the courtroom, coupled with the media's relentless coverage, turned the trial into a global sensation. Everyone had an opinion, and every detail seemed to matter. The glove-don't-fit moment, Simpson's slow-speed car chase, and Cochrane's memorable defense tactics became cultural references that are still talked about today. For many, the trial was a form of entertainment, a real-life drama that unfolded on television in front of an entire nation. It was a spectacle that bridged the gap between entertainment and real life, making people feel personally connected to the case, even if they had no direct connection to the victims or the defendant. What makes the O.J. Simpson case so captivating is not just the evidence that was presented, but the mysteries that remain. Was Simpson truly guilty? If not, who did it? Was there a conspiracy, or was he the victim of a corrupt police department? The unanswered questions create a sense of lingering uncertainty that keeps people coming back to the case. The case was filled with seemingly irrefutable evidence that pointed towards Simpson's guilt: DNA evidence, blood samples, and the infamous bloody glove found at the crime scene. However, the defense, led by the dream team of lawyers, skillfully raised doubts, focusing on inconsistencies in the evidence and accusations of police misconduct. The jury's acquittal left the world with more questions than answers. For many, the lingering uncertainty about Simpson's guilt adds to the case's allure. No matter how much time passes, the case remains an open wound, with each new documentary or book offering a new perspective or piece of information that might shed light on what really happened that night in 1994. The case also sparks a broader conversation about the American justice system and how it deals with high-profile cases, especially when race and fame are involved. Simpson's acquittal left many questioning the fairness of the trial and whether the justice system is truly impartial, or whether it is swayed by public opinion, celebrity status, and racial bias. Simpson's trial was a moment in history where the intersection of justice, race, and fame collided in a way that forced the nation to confront its flaws. It highlighted the disparities in how the legal system treats the wealthy and famous versus the average citizen, and how race can influence public opinion and legal outcomes. This broader discussion about fairness, privilege, and race remains relevant today, with Simpson's case continuing to serve as a focal point for these ongoing conversations. Beyond the legalities, the story of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman resonates on a more human level. Their tragic deaths and the years of abuse Nicole endured at the hands of her ex-husband are a painful reminder of the reality of domestic violence. While the media and the public were consumed by the trial itself, the true victims were the two lives lost in a senseless and violent crime. Nicole Brown Simpson, a mother of two, was killed in a brutal and heartbreaking way. Her death, along with Ron Goldman's, left behind a devastated family, friends, and a community that never truly recovered. Their deaths became secondary in the media frenzy, but for many, the memory of their tragic end is what makes the case so haunting. The O.J. Simpson case captivates because it's not just a murder trial, it's a multifaceted drama that touches on race, fame, justice, and tragedy. It remains a powerful narrative that continues to provoke thought, stir emotions, and fuel debate. Whether you believe Simpson was guilty or innocent, the story is one that resonates deeply with the complexities of the human experience and remains relevant in modern discussions about race and justice in America. This case, with its unanswered questions, media frenzy, and social impact, is far from over. It's a story that continues to haunt, captivate, and challenge us. The O.J. Simpson case has been the subject of countless theories and speculations, and its unresolved nature has left room for a wide range of opinions and conjectures. Despite the acquittal in the criminal trial, many still question the true circumstances surrounding the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. Whether due to the media circus, the racial tensions of the time, or the sensationalism surrounding Simpson's celebrity status, the case has spawned numerous alternative explanations and controversial theories. These theories continue to captivate the public and suggest that perhaps the full truth has never been revealed. One of the most prevalent theories is that O.J. Simpson was framed by the LAPD, This theory gained traction largely due to the racial tensions that existed between African American communities and the Los Angeles Police Department at the time. Detective Mark Foreman, who was part of the investigation team, became a central figure in this theory. During the trial, it was revealed that Foreman had a history of racist remarks and was accused of planting evidence to incriminate Simpson. Simpson's defense team seized on this, suggesting that the LAPD had a vested interest in pinning the murders on a high-profile African-American celebrity. The argument was that the police, looking to maintain their authority and protect their reputation, planted the bloody glove and manipulated the DNA evidence in order to secure a conviction. According to this theory, the police sought to make an example out of Simpson, despite the lack of conclusive evidence linking him directly to the crime. This theory remains compelling for many, particularly given the history of racial tensions in the 1990s, but it is far from universally accepted. Critics argue that while the LAPD was certainly problematic, the evidence against Simpson was overwhelming, and the idea of a full-scale conspiracy to frame him seems unlikely. Another theory that has persisted over the years is that O.J. Simpson did not act alone in the murders of Nicole and Ron, but instead had an accomplice. This theory suggests that Simpson, who had a long history of violent outbursts and was allegedly enraged by Nicole's new relationship with Ron Goldman, could have been aided by someone else, either intentionally or unknowingly. The speculation centers on the idea that the murders were too brutal for a single person to commit. Some theorists point to the speed and precision of the attacks, suggesting that an accomplice may have helped overpower the victims or ensured that Simpson was not seen at the scene. The idea of an accomplice raises more questions than answers. Who could have been involved? Could someone have been protecting Simpson, or did he even know his partner in the crime? Some have speculated that it was someone close to Simpson, possibly a friend or a person with a deep understanding of Simpson's personal life and emotional triggers. However, no substantial evidence has ever emerged to support the idea that Simpson had an accomplice, and this theory has been widely rejected by the courts. Still, it remains a popular idea among those who believe Simpson was incapable of carrying out such a violent crime on his own. The infamous glove found at the crime scene and later presented in court became one of the most debated pieces of evidence in the entire case. During the trial, Simpson struggled to fit the glove onto his hand, leading his defense attorney, Johnny Cochran, to declare, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." This dramatic moment caused a shift in the trial's momentum, and many still wonder if the glove was a pivotal piece of evidence or if it was intentionally mishandled or even planted. Some theories suggest that the glove, which was found at both the crime scene and Simpson's residence, may have been tampered with. It's been speculated that the glove was too small for Simpson's hand, and the prosecution's presentation of it in court led to a dramatic misinterpretation. Could it have been altered or damaged to fit the narrative of a botched prosecution? Or was it simply a coincidence that the glove didn't fit? There is also speculation that Simpson may have intentionally manipulated the glove during the trial to cast doubt on the evidence. Some argue that Simpson was savvy enough to exploit the moment and create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury. Whether the glove's failure to fit was a genuine inconsistency or part of a calculated defense strategy remains a source of intense debate. Another common theory surrounding the O.J. Simpson case is that the murders were the result of a crime of passion gone terribly wrong. This theory is rooted in the idea that Simpson's violent history with Nicole, coupled with his emotional instability, led to an uncontrollable outburst. According to this theory, Simpson, consumed with jealousy and anger over Nicole's relationship with Ron Goldman, confronted the two of them outside her home on the night of the murders. The theory posits that Simpson did not plan to kill Nicole and Ron, but acted in a fit of rage, perhaps not realizing the extent of his actions until it was too late. This theory explains the brutal nature of the murders, as well as Simpson's apparent inability to recall key details about the night. It also accounts for the possibility that Simpson was so overcome with emotion that he could not control his violent tendencies. The problem with this theory, however, is that it doesn't explain the extent of Simpson's calculated behavior afterward. If it was truly a crime of passion, why did Simpson flee the scene, go on the run in the infamous slow-speed chase, and hire a team of top-tier lawyers to defend him? The post-murder behavior suggests a level of premeditation and coldness that doesn't align with the idea of an unplanned, spontaneous killing. Finally, a fringe theory that has circulated in various circles is that the entire case was orchestrated as a distraction from other political and societal issues. At the time, some believe that the trial was strategically timed to divert public attention away from growing national concerns, such as the fallout from the Rodney King beating, racial tensions in Los Angeles, and the impending 1994 midterm elections. This theory argues that Simpson's case, with its drama, spectacle, and celebrity angle, was used as a smokescreen by powerful figures in politics or media to keep the public distracted while more pressing issues were being handled behind the scenes. Of course, this theory has little to no evidence, and the idea of orchestrating a complex murder case to serve as a distraction remains highly speculative. However, it speaks to the cultural and political climate of the time and adds yet another layer to the intrigue surrounding the case. Theories and speculations surrounding the O.J. Simpson case have continued to thrive in the years following that trial, whether through a belief in a police conspiracy, doubts about the evidence, or the lingering question of Simpson's true involvement. These ideas ensure that the case remains unresolved in the public's mind. As new details and documentaries emerge, it's clear that the search for the truth is far from over. The O.J. Simpson case is not just a legal mystery, it's a cultural puzzle that will continue to captivate and intrigue for years to come. So what really happened that night in 1994? Could O.J. Simpson have really been innocent? Or did the defense team pull off the most stunning courtroom maneuver in history? And perhaps the most chilling question, did the truth about Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman's murders ever truly come to light? We may never know. But one thing is for sure, the story isn't over yet. In our next video, we'll explore how Simpson's life unraveled after the trial and whether justice was ever truly served. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and drop a comment below.